So when you and I first started working together, we were working at a startup, and we were figuring out basically that somehow quantity trumped quality at
Yes.
that point in our careers. But maybe you could share a little bit about how you how you came to that point.
I think it was just a necessity. Uh, doing video production, we everything we were doing back then was on the ground, last minute. We're trying to get exposure, and it's hard trying to stay on the straight and narrow when you have so many people kind of pushing you in one or two directions. So I did the best I could to try to make sure that we, you know, stayed at least in our legal limits and get everything
We
done.
didn't
No, we did though. We did mostly, uh,
mostly.
mostly in a sense. There was no money being made back then anyway, so it's not like anyone was
Right.
really losing out necessarily. But I think the thing that I learned from that exposure was yes, you do have to sacrifice quality for quantity to a certain degree, but
hmm
what is really quality? I mean, quality is just meeting your viewer's expectation to a certain degree, right? So if you have, I don't know, jump cuts and some sketchy audio, but your message is getting across, then does it really matter? And the data showed that it didn't. That was back when like Vine videos were big and all this kind of stuff was it was like the Wild West. And I mean,
hmm
any technical editor would just be, cringing at some of the choices that people were making when they're editing. But they're, at the end of the day, if it's effective, then you're kind of being effective. So
Well,
it's a hard pill to swallow.
yeah, it is. But it also kind of, for me, gave me kind of some thoughts about like what the goal really was with video, right? It wasn't necessarily just to tell a story. It became much more about like the KPIs that you could drive. So even though we were doing things that maybe weren't the highest quality, like the way that we got trained to do them in film school, right? Or the way that like if you left us to our own devices and we were making a documentary, we would have done them.
Yeah.
Um, right. But it was much more about like, hey, can we drive user growth?
I think the thing that is most interesting about our process, and this was, you know, everything was shot on the ground. It was all ad hoc. It was, getting whoever was there available to try to be on camera with, just a signature. And what you ended up seeing was you just got to try everything. There was really no committee. There was no, oh, we got to set a storyboard and we got to do a script and we need to get approval and all of this stuff. What we really were able to do was set up a system where we were directly corresponding our choices in video strategies with exactly what our consumers were consuming. So you were able to get just feedback right away. You were editing a video, it was going out that week, and it was about something that just got created like 2 days before or the day of. Or we just happened to be somewhere and it was like, hey, I got this great idea. Oh, you guys sell shoes? How about we just shoot your booth? Oh, you want to tell some stories? Yeah, let's tell some stories. And then we put it up and people were like, that wasn't very good. And we're like, okay, we're never doing that again. Next. It was just like, oh, this landed? Cool, we'll do more of these. And then we were just able to get like immediate feedback because not only were we engaging our viewers who were actually the people that were in the videos, it's like this weird world where we had access to everybody all the time. And then we could literally just ask them, hey, do you want to help us shoot this video? Oh, what do you think? Do you have any ideas? Oh yeah, why don't we try that? And then you could just literally do it right then. So it was pretty unique sort of situation, be able to edit, test, and then create things and, get feedback immediately.
Being able to see, like you said, like what landed and what didn't, and just gave us ideas about how to do the next thing. And one thing that I learned from that situation was, okay, we actually have to, like, we can create faster if we make a plan and if we set up some systems that we can build within, because then we can keep our quality a little bit higher. We can create a testing plan, and we can use like general knowledge kind of across the board and test that over and over again.
Exactly. The thing that was interesting, and it's what we're talking about really is just creating videos for social media, getting
Yeah.
exposure, and then also engaging clients in a way that's meaningful to them directly. And the thing that was, I guess, crucial about taking that knowledge that we learned, just kind of shooting whatever, is when you don't have a plan, if things land, it's great, like it works.
Right.
But if they don't, it's zero. You know what I mean? Like, because you didn't really have a plan and you were just trying everything. Yeah, some things landed, some things went viral, but a lot of things didn't go anywhere. And it's weird, the stuff that did take off, because it wasn't always obvious to what you would think would be the most successful. It had a lot to do with timing and, I guess, what people were interested in content wise and how it landed. And it wasn't necessarily like I had made some stuff that was much more produced than everything else. And it wasn't as successful as some of the random ad hoc things that we ended up doing that were funny or had like the right people in them. You know what I mean?
Right.
And those did great. And then we did more of that, and it was great for a little bit, then it petered off. So it's,
Yep.
Without having all the pre-production and everything, yes, you get to do things quickly and be more agile, but your consistency is all over the place. And when we're trying to do like best practices and trying to work with brands now, what you can, I guess, understand is it is about testing and the data and the results. And it's not always about what you think is going to be right, because you can make something beautiful, but if it doesn't do what it was supposed to do, then it really doesn't matter how good it looked. At the end of the day, it didn't do anything.
Right. And, like that's kind of the premise that I got started on. I was like, well, so you could create, this beautiful $250,000 video. What happens when you put it on YouTube and don't put any ad spend behind it, or you don't, like, it just doesn't resonate with your audience? Nothing happens. And it could be on brand. It could have a great story. Like, all of those things can be true, and it still can get no distribution. So I think like one of the things that I've noticed kind of recently is, a lot of folks who are brand storytellers are like, seem a little afraid of data to me. And I think that's the wrong approach, right? You have to like live in your data, right? Like, yeah, I mean, we're if you work at an agency and you're a professional creative, like, table stakes should be that you're a good storyteller and that you understand the scientific the scientific method of creating a story, right? Like, we've all read Joseph Campbell. We all understand the hero's journey. We all understand how we bring in those different elements that create a compelling story. Everybody knows how to do that who is a creative professional. If you don't, then go back and read some Joseph Campbell, right?
Yeah.
So you can get there. And like, there's a ton of people out there who can do that. But if you don't dig into the data, if you don't create a testing plan and understand like what actually is resonating with your clients and your buyers, it's just never going to get out of first gear. You're going to be stuck there.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And listen, people have created super successful businesses being in first gear. I just think that there's exponential growth out there if you can get yourself in the data, like combine that amazing storytelling with data and with, user research and insights, and be able to really build something that is like, it's not necessarily going to go viral, but it can actually be developed to drive a KPI and can have that outcome.
Yeah. What's interesting, and there's there's so many YouTube videos out there, how to make a viral video, how to, grow your audience, how to do everything. And the one thing that I've noticed that is a commonality between all of that is it's so stringent on being at the peak of what is in. And for something like that, for a business, it's not sustainable unless you have a huge marketing budget. And most companies don't. They've been burned a lot. They've had people come in and give them all these metrics and tell them that X plus Y equals Z, and you're going to make a profit. And if you just do these three things, everything is going to work out. And it doesn't. And they go, okay, now who do I trust? What am I supposed to do? Here's another marketing company telling me that the data is going to tell me and it's going to get me a profit. And then it doesn't. And then how many times does that need to happen before you're just like, the data is useless? But as you and I well know, it isn't. It's always the data. The problem is that the ego and sort of posturing gets involved. And when you have a lack of transparency and you're making content for people and you have confusing data or you have the wrong metrics, because that happens, right? It's
all
like,
the time. Yeah.
yeah, oh, look at all these views. Yeah, but who cares? If none of those people bought anything, it doesn't mean anything.
It's the same. It's the same as if it sits on a YouTube channel and nobody sees it, right?
Yeah. Ironically, talking about the company we worked in the past is one of our most successful videos ever. It got like 3 million views, and
It was the Icelandic courses, right?
yeah. It was a very specific horse, and I don't even want to mention it because they were so upset that we misrepresented the name, this very specific name that they had been trying to carve out for this horse, that they ended up wanting to take it down. They didn't care that millions of people had seen this video, that had gotten the exposure that they were really trying to get for this very specific breed. And they were just so upset because it was slightly the words that I wrote on there were slightly off, and it whiffed. So you have most successful thing and an upset client. And to me, that's a fail. So it didn't matter that it succeeded as a video and got the views that, it was supposed to get. They ended up getting, really angry with us. And in the end, the video is gone. It doesn't exist on YouTube anymore. And it's, it's a perfect example of how something can be successful and not successful at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of that's where we put our flag, right? Is we're like, hey, look, I don't really care about your feelings, right? I care about how this performs and whether it makes you money. And I think that's a piece that gets overlooked all the time. Something that I see, when I first went out on my own, right? It was like, okay, cool. We're going to run paid media. We're going to make videos and we're just going to drive a ton of leads. And we did, right? We had SaaS model companies that we were getting users for 25 cents a piece. Didn't matter because they didn't do anything with them, right? They didn't pick up the phone and call that person and be like, hey, do you want to sign up for a paid membership? I'll give you 3 months free, or whatever it was. So you make a really good point, right? If you focus on the wrong metrics, then it really doesn't matter if those metrics are successful or that person feels good about getting all those views, or if that person feels bad because you misspelled something, right? It has to be you have to come to some sort of agreement with your client about what the expectations are.
It's something that I think can, get in the way of an effective marketing strategy, and knowing exactly what your very end result is, which is making a sale or getting,
right,
growing your audience. And that has to be laser focused for every metric that you're looking for. But, things have changed. AI has gone on the scene. The way that data is collected is more transparent. We as marketers now understand, because in a sense, marketing was a bit snowed by the social media platforms to a certain degree, where they were able to convince a lot of people that certain metrics were really important, and they actually weren't at all. And no one really knew that until time had passed and a lot of people had wasted a lot of money, and it
Right.
makes it very hard for, for everyone to kind of figure out, all right, well, we got all this data, that's great, but what is important? You're giving us a lot of stuff that actually doesn't matter. And how do we like weed through all of that to get something more interesting, which, I'm really hoping that having the AI on the scene can help.
Well, I mean, AI can be so helpful in terms of like developing ideas and building out a testing schedule and giving you, and like analyzing data because it doesn't like, and in my opinion, honestly, like that's where AI provides the most value is in analyzing the data because it doesn't matter how smart any one person is. A computer can just do math faster than us. It just kind of goes without saying. So it can analyze data, look for patterns, and then execute, or well, at least present those patterns so that the team can then execute.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping anyway. I mean, it certainly helped me
Right.
in, the things that I've been doing. It's, the best thing about the AI sort of involvement in our work life has ease of access, ease of tool sets, and just getting to the end result faster, which in the end is what we want. And it allows you to have, more time to work on the fine tuning and polishing.
Yeah.
It's like I look back at all the stuff we just threw together, and it's like, man, if I if I had the AI tools I have now back then,
Oh God. I
quality would
know.
have been so much higher while keeping the exact same output. I would have been able
Right.
to clean up audio super fast. I would have been able to edit interviews so much faster if I could
Oh
just,
my God.
delete some text and then delete silence and just cut it all up. And I mean, it would have saved me so much time.
But the cool part is that now we actually can do some of the things that we kind of wanted to do then. We can do them much more effectively now. And it allows us to keep that quality level higher, maintain brand standards, maintain the narrative that the client is going for, and actually test different benefits and different narratives so that, like we used to be able to be like, oh, yeah, like these are the narrative elements that are driving the conversions that you're looking for. Now we can be like, okay, cool. These are the narrative elements that are driving the elements that you're looking for. And here are 50 videos that play along with that. And we can dive even deeper and I mean, look, when you're running conversion rate optimization, a couple of decimal places are huge, right? So being able to just continue to increase that conversion rate, whether it's in the paid media with the videos and being able to test all of the different elements within them, or it's on page. I mean, depending on the client you're working with, it can be millions and millions of dollars that you're driving with that.
Yeah. I mean, it is harder to move the needle when you're much bigger. Uh, if anything, the things that, we see so many brands have a lot of ideas and a lot of, I guess, preconceived notions about what's possible. And it is nice to be able to solve certain things a lot easier now and to be able to get to an end result a lot easier and be able to get clarity in your, I guess, visualizations a lot easier.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is, you have a lot more education out there, I think.
Yeah.
And when you have, I guess, shown a spotlight, well, how do I put this? It's like going to a museum, right? You go to a museum, you see a bunch of, say, you see a bunch of art on the walls, and someone's like, "Oh, okay, that's a bunch of colored squares. Like, I could have done that." And it's like, what? I'm glad you feel so confident in your ability that by looking at something someone made, you feel like you could do it. But at the end of the day, you didn't. And you didn't
Right.
think of it until you saw it. And now it's hard to go back, right? You can't go back to a time where you didn't see that piece and you were just sitting in your house and you're like, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to paint a bunch of different colored squares and arrange them in a certain way. You didn't do that. Someone else did.
Right.
What AI has kind of done is it's taken away that like barrier of, well, I got to pick up some paint and, I got to come up with this idea
Right.
and do all this stuff. Now you can just kind of fool around as much as you really want in your imagination, which is great. And it does allow people to, I guess, have a little bit of that creative process, inherently, which isn't the worst thing. Because now when you have a
No,
conversation, people will actually know a little bit about the creative process, and they won't just think like, oh, why doesn't this look like what is in my mind? Now they know like that's not that easy. I'm trying to tell a computer what's in my mind and it's just me and I'm still not getting it right, you know?
right. It does reduce the barrier to entry in terms of execution. And it's a funny conversation I have, and it's not just, with clients, but it's with coworkers, it's like, well, I'm worried that like, we're going to talk about this idea and somebody's going to steal it. I'm like, well, I actually don't really give a shit whether they steal it or not. If they can execute on it, okay, right? Like more power to them, because the value is in execution. It's not in ideation. I mean, ideation is important. It's the first step in execution, but it's like, it's the first step. You can have the idea. And like, it's nice that AI does make like that executable step easier. It reduces the barrier. But even as somebody who does have a film school background, the execution is still not quite where it needs to be. And it's not going to be. I mean, it's going to take a long, long time for AI to be able to execute like you.
Yeah. Well, even if it does, that's great, because then we can move on to something else, then we can worry about
spend more time in ideation.
Exactly. And you can, I guess, focus your energy elsewhere, because really this is all just about time and energy. And if something is able to free that up, then you can use it for something else.
Right. That whole time you were talking about like those painting those squares, and you ever see that movie Art School Confidential?
Oh, yes.
All I can think about is John Malkovich and his triangles.
Yeah. I actually had a classmate who turned in a blank canvas for a project, and we're like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I ran out of time because I wasn't doing the work. But he turned it in and he named it apathy. And then he had a whole little like speech about how art and apathy and all this stuff. And he got a B+ on it. And we're like, you literally didn't do anything. You just said some stuff. And the teacher looked at us and said, yeah, I know. But art is not always about exactly what you did. It's about your presentation. And we were just like, what if we all didn't do anything? And he's like, it wouldn't have worked. We're like, oh, come on. Are you serious? Yeah. But you know what? He did a thing. It was original. No one else thought of it. And he had a whole thing to back it up. And that right there is execution of a thing. His actual effort level was extremely low. So in a sense, he had a brilliant idea, but it only worked once, which is literally a viral video, right?
All right. Exactly. And what's he doing now?
He is working at his parents' company. He was already set. Like, he didn't even need to be at the school.
Yeah.
It was,
just a good time.
That's all. Yeah. I'm glad he had the freedom to just kind of do whatever and come up with these ideas, which, that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, I think it's interesting. Like, we talk about like how that's kind of like a viral video, right? Like, it worked once and then it never works again. I think one of the pieces, I think it's time for us to get away from like trying to make things go viral, right? Like, I have clients come to me like, hey, how do we make these anti-gas strips go viral? You don't. Like, that's never going to happen. Well, honestly,
it could, but it may have nothing to do with your brand. It may have nothing to do with your messaging, and it may have nothing to do with getting a sale.
Right. And it may not actually drive any revenue.
No. And honestly, in order to, because I had some ideas, I had some like marketing strategies for that, but I think at the end of the day, it would have destroyed their brand because it wouldn't align. You end up like looking again at the result, right? It's the result.
Right.
Like, what result do you want? You want to make a sale? Okay, how do you do that? Is it a viral video? I don't know. I mean, Old Spice can get away with having random commercials on television because in the end, they're selling deodorant that people were probably going to buy anyway. And now it's just brand recognition. Everything's about brand recognition because they've been around forever. You can't look at that and go, hey, I want to do that, because nobody knows who you are. And you can be cool kitschy and all this kind of stuff. But you still, at the end of the day, have to ask yourself, is this what I want for my brand? Is this how I'm going to be effective? Because once you start going down that road and you stop being cool and interesting, everything falls apart. It's very hard to be cool forever.
It is. And I think, like, I look at Dollar Shave Club as a really good example of that. That commercial was as good a commercial as I have ever seen on the budget that they did it, right? Like, his timing was great. He crushed it. But the fact is that success, while it did drive his company to some success, that success was not repeatable for him, right? You look at the Harmon brothers, like in the Pooper, like they do something that kind of works over and over again. There is a formula that does work, but over time, I don't believe that. I don't know that it has the value that people put out there, right? Because when I think about what, like, the projects that we worked on that have gone really well and have driven a ton of revenue, nothing has gone viral, right?
It's
It's not
sustainability.
about that.
Yeah, it's
Right.
about
It's
sustainability and brand messaging.
right. And it's about testing, right? So when I think about the way that we shoot video and the way that we produce video and the way that we test video, it is very different than trying to produce something that's funny that goes viral. And, one thing I will say is, like, it's important to remember that sometimes going viral is just literally throwing as much shit out there as you possibly can. When I look at what is going viral on TikTok these days, right? Like, right now in sports, there's that kid who plays online and, he just basically records himself all the time playing Madden. And then one of those videos went viral because it was funny, because people thought it was cool, whatever. But when you start to get into creating product video and creating video that's supposed to drive revenue, or you have to think about it from a holistic standpoint. And so to bring it back to, like, the way that we create video, we want to make sure that you can test all of those different elements and get incremental gains that eventually add up to exponential revenue. And every single interaction with your buyer is an opportunity to gain, right? Is an opportunity to increase the quality and the success of your program. So
What you're describing is the risk versus sustainability strategy.
right.
And I guess at the end of the day, there is a place for trying to boost things beyond expected growth. Like, if all you're looking to do is sell a company, then you're taking a big risk. You're just gambling with your investment. You're gambling with the people who work at the company. You're gambling with your idea. You're trying to grow something beyond its, like, intended capacity just to offload it to somebody else and have them kind of sort it out. I guess that's a way to do something, but that's not really what we want. We want partnerships. We want long-term growth. A lot of times having a spike out of nowhere can actually be detrimental to a company, because you start making your business plan based on, that's something that was kind of an outlier. You're really going to make a lot of bad choices thinking that things are going to be more sustainable than they are. And that can really hurt you, taking on too much personnel, developing a product that just kind of was a one-off. There's a lot of risk involved in that. And it's good to have somebody who can recognize that when you're making your content and making sure that things are also sustainable in that regard. And if that's what you're going for, then, you always have to make sure that you're looking at that end.
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because we had a conversation with my wife who works at Ben & Jerry's about content that converts.
Yeah.
Right. And she had a lot of really interesting ideas about, the content that did convert. And there was some really, I think the one was it was a recipe that you could click on and add everything into a cart. And there was basically a shoppable video. And that did go viral. It did create a ton of revenue. And it created a ton of revenue because it was easily shoppable, right? It was easily monetizable. But how did they get there? Right? Like, I think that's the question that I think eludes a lot of folks, is like, how do you get to testing, right? How many, right? How
much work they put into that infrastructure, and how, that whole system is so reliant on everything that they did for like a decade before that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. They built their brand. They understood their consumer. They do understand their consumer well. And most of those recipe videos don't do shit, but they built out a system that allowed it to be monetizable, allowed it to go viral. They found the right partner, influencer to partner with that connected with the right recipe, and that worked. But it took them, I don't know how many tries. And we experienced that too, right? Like things don't work right off the bat. And it's one of the reasons actually, we kind of don't work with smaller companies anymore, is because they don't have the infrastructure to deal with it. They don't have the budget. They don't have the patience. They don't have the sophistication to have a product get really big and really popular really quickly. And they also don't understand that it's like years of work to get that point.
It is.
Right.
Well, it's longevity again. If you have to make sure of what you really want. And if you're looking to grow your business, then you want to focus on the growth. It doesn't have to be like a tree, it's not going to take forever, but you do have to take in consideration that growth too fast can be just as bad as no growth at all. Rapid growth is great, but it's always going to kind of contract, and you need to recognize the systems that are in place that are working and the ones that need to be let go, and to make sure that your ego is not involved and that you're looking at things from a kind of stabilizing manner, and that you want to make sure that at the end of the day, you are being profitable, you're making the right choices and all of that. But we're a little off track, but it's a little bit,
except
a little bit.
It's on track. I just, like everything needs to run through I think that to bring it back full circle, you have to have a plan in place. You have to know that it's going to take 3 months to get your plan running and off the ground. And then it's going to take 9 months to really start to have an amount of data that you can make judgments around, and then it's going to take a year to actually past that 9 months. It's going to take another year to actually get sustained growth, right? Everybody in the startup world always talks about the hockey stick. Fine. There are companies that do that, but the fact is that the companies that have long-term sustained growth, they're way more effective than the companies that have that hockey stick growth. And they're able to have patience. They're able to take their time and see the growth and understand what is happening over time, so that it is repeatable. They can do it again, right? So that one video for Ben and Jerry's did go viral. You know what? They had another one go viral and another one, because they learned from that. They took that information and they used it, and they have a plan around it.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, the viralness of that video was less important than the effectiveness of connecting with their customer. And I bet that if it wasn't a viral video, that the fact that it increased their revenue, that's all that would have mattered.
Because one does. That's the crazy part, right? Is a bunch of them don't go viral. They all are ROI positive.
Exactly. That's exactly what the point is. The point is the positivity in your result. And, it's at the end of the day, the whole point of having a marketing strategy,
Right. I wonder if it makes sense for us to talk a little bit about how we build a testing strategy for video.
If we're looking at sort of the testing framework, then, we've kind of established that you need data in order to have a marketing strategy. Can you explain the framework where we take video and implement an A/B testing model from the beginning? Before we even are talking about concepts, we're already thinking about the testing part at the end. What does that look like? What kind of conversations are we having with a client when we're trying to set something like that up?
it has to come at the very beginning, right? Like everything that we plan for has to be around testing variables within a video, within a paid media strategy. So, I mean, I think A/B testing almost doesn't do it justice, right? Because it's multivariant testing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So when we go in, we have two conversations. One, we have a conversation about like, hey, what's the brand? What's the narrative? How do we create that? Right. And that really starts with the benefits of the product, right? Or as Elena likes to call them, RTBs, reasons to believe.
I believe.
But listen, I like RTBs better than benefits because, I like an acronym.
So
starting at those different reasons to believe with a product, you can start to say, okay, like here are our testing buttons, right? So like if we take a product like this water bottle, like what are the things that are really great about this water bottle, right? It's big, it is insulated, it's metal, right? It keeps my water cold. It's a great color. Like, let's not forget about the color. And I got a wolf on the front of it. But that's custom, right? So like those are right. So like if I was creating product video for that water bottle, I would say, okay, so here are the things that I really like about it. It's insulated. Okay, cool. So that keeps things hot, that keeps things cold, and that keeps things lukewarm, right? All of those things are desired states for liquids that you're putting in there. And so I would say, okay, great. Let's test. Let's create a bunch of video about things that are hot that go into that. Soup,
or cool,
hot chocolate, coffee, whatever. Bunch of things that are cold, like showing that the ice doesn't melt, right? Like those would be the things that you could test. And then I would say, okay, like look, I love this color. Maroon is my favorite color, as my kid will happily tell everybody. You know my daddy's favorite color is maroon, and he's 43 and weighs 210 pounds.
You're like, nobody asked anything.
Yeah, no, but he'll tell you. But then I would test all the different colors, right? And I would test them in different ways. I would put them on colored backgrounds. I would put them on white backgrounds. I would put them on black backgrounds. I would have them in lifestyle shoots, right? And then, oh, cool, they're custom. I can get all of these different things. Well, I like wolves because I have a wolf dog, but not everybody likes wolves. So I would start to show all of the different custom designs and test those different custom designs. Now, all of a sudden, I can start to combine these things to create videos that show something hot going into a maroon bottle that has a wolf on it. And you can just continue to test, but you have to identify what the different elements are. You're done on Facebook and Google and Instagram if you do not have money to test, because no longer are the days like we had when we were at that other company where we could play with a couple of different variables and, do very specific targeting.
Yeah, targeting is different now. And it's not the worst thing, but I guess you are at the mercy of the algorithms and making sure that you're playing nice with their expected, I guess, inputs.
There are other platforms where you can go viral more easily. Look at TikTok, right? You can definitely go viral easier on TikTok, especially if you are on the TikTok shop, because they're trying to build out their e-commerce platform. I actually literally say it to every single client I talk to right now. Like,
but isn't that
put your stuff on the TikTok? Just put it on the TikTok shop, right? Get on there and tell people about it. And you don't have budget to hire an agency? Great. Put your stuff on TikTok, put your stuff on Facebook, put your stuff on Instagram, put your stuff on Google, and go. And that's where you can just kind of say like, all right, well, I'm going to build a testing plan, but I don't have the money to do it. So I'm just going to like crank out as much content as I can.
What about the people who do have the money for a testing plan? You want to have at least an understanding of your product, right? You have, as you said, the water bottle, durability, right, works with different temperatures, colors, customizability, etc. Yep. The size matters. Sorry. That there's a lot of different things that you need to know about your product and about what your customers want from your product. And then when you have those, you can test them out. We had a client and they were trying to figure out demographics and also, I guess you would call it like a lifestyle direction, whether they wanted to be active or something that was more about the home, things of that nature. And so what did we do? We went and we shot, I think, 5 different versions of their product in use. And it was one that was outdoors. You had like a single person with a dog. You had the animal element. You had somebody in the woods. You had someone active, riding their bike, doing all that kind of stuff. And putting that out there and seeing what resonated with people in the realm of that product's, I guess, environment. And we were able to find one that hands down won. And once we did, then we were able to figure out a product that won. And then once we had those 2 things, then we're able to set up an action plan and really direct a landing page that was geared towards all the things that people resonated with. And it was the most successful, I guess, system that we could put together for that specific product. And that all came down to the testing. And as you said, the multivariate, setup that we had from the very beginning.
And I think, I think I know who you're talking about, and we won't mention names, but they weren't perfect, right? Because they didn't have the appetite to go through a testing plan. They lost their nerve. Even after like success started to happen, they were like, well, it didn't happen fast enough.
There was even more, I think, involved there. And, not to like get too deep into it, but before we even started out, there were some very specific ideas that they had about markets that they wanted to go after. And it was to their detriment, because how do you know? Like, did you just wake up on a Tuesday and you're like, these are the perfect people? The point is to figure out who the perfect people are. And then once you find them, you show them exactly what it is that they're looking for. They're the ones who are going to tell you.
I think it's sometimes a mistake, especially with brand new startups. They go in there with that idea. They're like, oh, we have all this experience in the industry, so like we don't need to do consumer research or insights. And honestly, that always makes me a bit nervous when I think about working with a company. You got to come to the table when you want to work with a performance agency like us and you actually want to start driving revenue. You need to know who your demographic is, right? Like, go out and do the research, pay for customer insights, right? It's a month of working with us to get those customer insights, maybe 2, depending on the package that you get. But go out and get those customer insights. I can recommend some really good people. Map and Fire is fantastic.
It's important. I mean, companies are always doing it. The ones that are in for the long term, they want to make sure that, I mean, we've seen this so many times. You see it with car industry. It's really big in the car industry, right? It's like you make these cars and then you can even see it. I swear, if you put them all in a line, you make a car, people love it. You make it slightly different. And then, a couple of years down the road, you realize, wow, we didn't do anything new. All we did was tweak a couple of things and people are like burned down on it. Like, now we need to figure out, we need to start again. What do? Did they just randomly start making things? No. They asked all their customers. They start, figuring out exactly what it was that was working, what wasn't working. And then they base everything that they're going to do a new thing on that. And then lo and behold, usually it's successful, at least to a certain degree. And then they tweak that a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And it just keeps cycling like that. You got to know, you got to ask. You can't just assume.
Yeah. We should have the guy from Map and Fire on one of these.
That'd be cool. I think they would definitely have some interesting insights, I have no doubt, on that whole process. Yeah. You talk about A/B testing. It's all about performance. It's all about figuring out your product, knowing your audience. Once you have all of that, platforms, like what's the best platform for this? We mentioned a few, but those were more
what's the best platform? I don't know.
Or just the more ideal platform. Like, are there ones for certain things? Are they all good in their own way? Like, what are we looking at?
It depends on who your demographics are. I think that's the piece that's the most important. If you're selling to 40 plus moms, you should be on Instagram and you should be in Meta, right? I think if you're selling to Gen Z, TikTok, Snapchat, those are going to be better. There's going to be new platforms coming out that you should be looking at. I think everybody should probably be running a test on Google just because everybody uses Google all the time.
Search is always there.
It's always there. And you can get some interesting data back from pretty small sample sizes just because, or small ad spends, because Google, you can get cheap impressions. The place you get the cheapest impressions, I don't know if this is the case anymore. About a year ago, the place you could get the cheapest impressions was in Snapchat stories. I think Instagram stories probably overtook them, and I imagine that TikTok is probably competing for that right now.
Probably.
I think one of the things to always think about with any of these platforms is make sure that you are paying attention to their release cycle. So if they're releasing new features, so we talked about like TikTok shops today.
Yeah.
Right? If they're releasing something and they're trying to drive it, build to that, because that's the way you can get some of that organic juice. But man, all of these platforms have their positives and negatives. I mean, when we were talking about going, with that working with that direct to consumer toy brand, we actually ended up choosing YouTube Shorts over TikTok for them because of the demographic data. Whereas it's the same video essentially, but the demographic data led us to believe that YouTube Shorts was going to have a better ROI.
Well, it sounds like
TikTok had a younger demographic.
Yeah, it sounds like once you know all the demographics, once you know your plan, it sort of lends itself to certain platforms inherently.
Yeah.
And you need somebody who understands that. Otherwise, you could be, I guess, spinning your wheels on the wrong platform, thinking you're hitting your target audience, and you're just whiffing. Yeah.
And I would say that like the smaller, less mature platforms are probably going to have higher ROI. Actually, I think the cheapest impressions right now are on Twitter because nobody wants to advertise with Twitter.
Well, we all know why that is.
Yeah, because it's called X now.
It's fine. It's not ambiguous.
The platform formerly known as Twitter.
I like that.
That's what I'm calling it. I also think that there's value in testing all those different platforms. Just understand, like some of them are just going to take your money. Meta is just going to take your money. Sorry, Zuck. I know we're on the same team, but we're not really.
He's on his own team.
He's on his own team, but you have to get to a certain level of ad spend to really hit ROI on Meta anymore. It just
totally is. She's always telling me like if there is a certain barrier of cost where if you don't put in enough, your results are going to take so long that the results, they won't necessarily help you like long term.
You like, if I'm going to call out a number, you have to be spending at least $5,000 a month. You just do. And I know that that's not what people want to hear because they want to be out there. But like, honestly, I would be taking that budget and creating content if I couldn't reach that number in terms of ad spend. And so, I mean, it's one of the reasons that's where our level starts, right? We're not working with people who can't spend $5,000 a month on ad spend. And really, it should be closer to 10 to actually be able to run tests of significance. So,
well, if it makes you profit, then it doesn't really matter what the inherent cost is.
That's right.
Because you're getting it back.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, you should be.
That's the plan anyway.
Yeah. But it's all a test.
It is always a test. And it's a long-term process. And if you're in it for the long haul business-wise, then you're going to be in it for the long haul with your strategy.
That's right.